Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a monumental piece of work, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
It sold, what, over 12 million copies?
Mhm.
But it's so much more than a bestseller. It's just an essential text on human resilience.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to distill how Frankl's horrific experiences in 4 concentration camps actually validated his entire life's theory.
Right, that our main drive in life isn't for pleasure, like Freud said, or for power, like Adler. It's the search for meaning.
And he anchors the whole thing on this one quote he got from Nietzsche, which feels like the thesis for the entire book.
He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow.
That's the one. It's the key. And the book is brilliant in its structure, isn't it? It's in 2 parts.
Yeah, first you get the evidence, his raw personal story from the camps, and then you get the theory that came from it, logotherapy.
So let's start with that story, the descent. It begins with this overwhelming shock.
It does. Frankl describes being packed into cattle cars, 1,500 people, standing for days.
And when they finally arrive at Auschwitz, their brains immediately try to protect them. He calls it the delusion of reprieve.
Exactly. It's this desperate hope. They see prisoners who look well-fed and think, okay, maybe this is just a labor camp. It won't be so bad.
But those were the capos, the ruthless prisoners turned guards.
And that delusion shatters at the moment of selection, what he calls the finger game.
Describe that scene for us. It's so chilling.
An SS officer just stands there, casually pointing left or right as each person files past.
Right meant work.
Right meant temporary survival. Left meant the crematorium. Immediately, Frankl was in the 10% who went right.
An instant arbitrary judgment on your life.
And right after that comes the complete erasure of your identity. They take everything, your clothes, your wedding ring.
Shaved head. You're not a person anymore. You're a number.
Yeah.
Frankl was 119,104.
And there's this one moment that just perfectly captures that. He tried to save his life's work, a scientific manuscript he had hidden in his coat.
Yeah, he asks a seasoned prisoner if there's any way he can keep it. And the guy just looks at him and says,
Shit.
and with that one word, his entire former life, his work, his status, it was all gone.
That's the end of the shock phase. Then comes something worse, in a way, apathy.
He calls it an emotional death.
Unnecessary one, a protective shell. You can't survive that level of constant brutality and injustice otherwise. Your feelings just have to shut down.
The examples he gives are just hard to read.
He describes watching, completely unmoved, as a doctor picked the gangrenous, frostbitten toes off a 12-year-old boy.
Or prisoners stripping a still warm corpse for a better pair of shoes or a piece of string.
You had to stop caring. If you didn't, you'd break.
And your inner life just shrinks down to the most primitive level.
Right. Your dreams aren't about freedom anymore. They're about cake or a warm bath. The prisoners would spend hours just whispering recipes to each other.
It's a total regression. But there was a point of no return. A term they had for it.
The Muslim.
What did that signify in the camp?
It was their slang for someone who had given up, emaciated, sick, with that look in their eyes. They had lost the will to live.
And they were usually dead within days.
Which is why the #1 rule for survival was look fit for work. Shave every day, even with a piece of glass. Stand up straight. You had to act like you wanted to live.
It's all about these tiny internal choices.
Yeah.
But then there's this incredible moment of joy.
The relativity of suffering.
Exactly. They're on a transport, terrified they're going to the Mauthausen camp.
Yeah.
But then they realize it's only going to Dachau.
Which they knew didn't have a gas chamber. And they're overcome with relief. Their happiness wasn't about getting something good. It was about the worst possible thing not happening.
So that's the descent. Complete degradation. But this is where the book and Frankl's philosophy makes its critical turn. The ascent.
This is the core paradox. He realizes that even when you've lost everything externally, as he says, man can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom.
The last of the human freedoms.
The choice of your attitude. That's the one thing they could never take away. And that choice determined everything. It determined whether you became a saint or a swine.
Offering your last piece of bread versus stealing someone else's.
Precisely. And for Frankl, his personal anchor in all this was love.
He talks about the brutal marches to the work site, freezing, starving, and he would just focus on the image of his wife.
He didn't even know if she was alive, but it didn't matter. He had this profound realization that love goes beyond the physical person. It's a spiritual connection that couldn't be broken by death or distance.
And that gave his suffering a meaning.
It did. And sometimes that meaning came from the most unexpected places, like moments of beauty.
Which seems impossible to imagine in that setting.
Yet it happened. He describes watching a sunset over the mountains from the barred window of the transport car, and another prisoner just whispers, "How beautiful the world could be."
Those moments proved the inner self was still alive.
But losing that inner why was fatal. There was that heartbreaking story of the composer, F.
Right, he had a dream that the war would be over and they'd be liberated on March 30th. He staked his entire survival on that date.
And as the date got closer and the news from the front was bad, he just faded. His hope collapsed.
He got sick on March 29th and died on the 31st.
Frankl believed the loss of faith in the future, his why, literally lowered his body's resistance to the typhus.
Which brings us to one of his most powerful ideas, that suffering itself can have meaning.
If it's unavoidable, yes. If it's your fate, then bearing it becomes your unique task. He quotes the poet Rilke, "How much suffering there is to get through."
So to suffer bravely is a genuine achievement.
It is. He says tears weren't a sign of weakness, but a sign of the courage to suffer.
And he immediately put this idea to work in the camp.
Yeah, preventing suicides. He'd find a man who was ready to give up and make him see that life was still expecting something from him.
He helped two men find their why. One had a child waiting for him in another country.
And the other had a series of scientific books that only he could finish. They weren't living for themselves anymore. They were living for their tasks.
And all of this, all these experiences became the foundation for his theory, logotherapy.
Exactly. Logos is Greek for meaning. It's the third Viennese school of psychotherapy. You had Freud's will to pleasure and Adler's will to power.
Frankl says the real primary driver is the will to meaning,
And if that will is frustrated, you get what he called the existential vacuum.
which he saw as the mass neurosis of the 20th century. People lost the old traditions that told them what they ought to do.
So now they don't even know what they wish to do. They just do what others do or what they're told.
You see that vacuum today. It manifests as boredom, what he called Sunday neurosis, that dread when the weekly hustle stops.
Or addiction. Or aggression. He cited studies showing huge percentages of alcoholics and drug addicts reporting a feeling of total meaninglessness in their lives.
So the goal of logotherapy isn't for the therapist to give you a meaning.
No, absolutely not. The meaning of your life is something only you can find. The therapists just help you see the possibilities. And Frankl lays out 3 main avenues to find it.
The first is the obvious one: creating a work or doing a deed. Accomplishment.
The second is experiencing something like beauty or nature, or encountering someone, basically through love. By loving someone, you see their potential and you help them achieve it.
And the third path takes us right back to the camps. It's the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering.
And his story about the elderly doctor is the perfect illustration of this. The man was devastated, mourning the death of his wife.
He was inconsolable. And Frankl doesn't give him some empty platitude. He asks a question.
He asks, "Doctor, what would have happened if you had died first and your wife had to survive you?"
And the doctor says, oh, that would have been terrible for her, how she would have suffered.
And Frankl just says, "You see, doctor, you have spared her all that suffering, but you have to pay for it by surviving and mourning her."
In that one instant, the man's suffering was reframed. It wasn't meaningless pain anymore.
It was a sacrifice made out of love. It had found its meaning.
This idea of finding hope despite pain, guilt, and death is what he calls tragic optimism.
It seems like a contradiction, but it's not. It's tied to his idea that life's transitoriness, the fact that it ends, is what makes it meaningful. Every choice matters because it's final.
But the past isn't lost.
Yeah.
He talks about it like stored assets.
Exactly. The deeds you've done, the love you've given, the suffering you've endured bravely, those are realities stored in the past. No one can ever take them away from you.
He even says old people should be envied for that.
And finally, he warns us about the paradox of self-actualization. If you aim for happiness or success directly, you'll miss.
It has to be a side effect.
An unintended one. It comes from dedicating yourself to a cause bigger than yourself or a person other than yourself. You find yourself by forgetting yourself.
So to bring this all together, what's the one central finding from this deep dive that you, the listener, can take away?
I think the bottom line, proven in the depths of Auschwitz, is that we are ultimately self-determining. We can't always choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response. We decide what our existence will be.
And we have to end with Frankl's own conclusion. It's so stark, but so powerful.
He says, "Man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, He is also that being who entered those gas chambers upright, with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips.
The capacity for both, the swine and the saint, exists in all of us. The choice is always there.
Always.
So for you, listening right now, here's the final thought. Frankl often said the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast should be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. Freedom is only half the story.
It demands responsibility. Life is asking something of you.
So what's the decision you're putting off? What unique task is waiting for you? Answering that question. That's where you'll find your meaning. Until next time, keep digging deep.